you ever walked into a room full of anticipation of the night ahead, only to realize the vibe you brought in is humming at a completely different frequency than the one in the room? Well, that was my experience last night. Let's talk about it. Welcome to Velvet Ash. I'm Celeste, and if you're here, thank you. Maybe you've returned after our first episode, or maybe this is your first time stumbling across this space. Either way, I'm glad you're here. Now, if this is your first time, let me tell you what this podcast is by telling you what it isn't. This is not a show built to scandalize or shame, and it's not here to pander or pacify either. If you're looking to binge, to skim, to scroll past, this probably won't feel in alignment. Because in this space, we sip and we savor. The tone here is intentional, unhurried, contemplative, and rooted in all the feelings. And I'll be honest with you, as I'm finding my voice in this space, you might wonder if I sound melancholy, or jaded, or maybe just hurt. And that's a fair question, because in our world, when someone speaks candidly about the human experience without a neat punchline or a motive attached, it's often assumed they must be coming from a negative place. But let me be clear, what I'm sharing with you doesn't come from the wound, it comes from the scar. And if that feels unfamiliar, or even a little heavy, that's okay. This is a soft space for hard things. You're welcome to bring all of you here. My healing has already taken place. What I offer now isn't burden, it's reflection. It may sound languid, but it's not laden. And my hope, the reason this space exists, is that somewhere in these words, you'll find something you didn't know you needed. So relax, unclench your jaw, and let the weight fall from your shoulders. And let's pour a glass, shall we? So I do some volunteer work here in my city, and another of the volunteers hosted a kickback at our house, sort of a welcome for new members and a season opener. When I arrived, it was a small gathering, just a few ladies and a couple of their husbands who made it a point to congregate elsewhere. The vibe was fine. Wine coolers were on deck, laughter here and there. We were good. Or at least that's how it looked on the surface. But for my empaths and people watchers out there, you know what I mean when I say something in that room wasn't sitting right. You can feel it, right? That shift beneath the surface, where the smiles start to feel rehearsed and the laughter carries a little too much weight. The conversation feels forced. Well, that was the situation here. It was one of those moments where everyone was being polite, gracious even, but beneath it all, there was this quiet hum of disconnection. You could feel it in the way conversations fluttered at the surface, never quite landing. Everyone knew why we should be there. A shared cause, a mission, maybe even a sense of duty. But no one seemed fully rooted in the moment, not emotionally, not spiritually, and certainly not soulfully. We had a common banner, sure, something noble enough to gather us around, but shared purpose doesn't always equal shared spirit, and that's where things get murky. Because the energy in the room wasn't hostile, far from it. It was more like a performance of unity. Everyone smiling, nodding, saying the right things, but it was hollow at the edges. The warmth didn't quite reach past the politeness. And here's the paradox I kept circling in my mind. We all wanted to connect. That's the part that struck me the most. You could tell by the way they dressed intentionally, by the effort in their small talk, by the hopeful glances around the room. Nobody came to be cold or guarded. They came to be seen, to belong, to feel something real. But that realness, it's slippery when we stay surface level. And if nobody feels safe enough to go deeper, then what are we really doing other than play acting sisterhood for the sake of optics? That's what haunted me as I sat there watching. How connection can be both the reason we show up and the one thing we still can't seem to access when we're there. So I started to wonder, not cynically but curiously, how would this room of women, so strikingly different in background, temperament, and lived experience, actually find connection if all they had in common was a hashtag or a cause? Would they risk dropping the act long enough to find something real? Or were they just rehearsing intimacy, hoping that that would be close enough? As the conversation drifted from updates about the organization we all volunteer with, it started to loosen. People leaned back a little, laughed a little more freely. That's when things got more personal. The kind of shift you notice when folks feel just safe enough to be a little more human. One of the women, a Latina, started sharing about her new job. She was warm, easy to talk to, and clearly excited. She mentioned how refreshing it was to work under two female executives. It was a pleasant surprise, she said, smiling. I thought they were going to be difficult, but they're actually really great. She said it lightheartedly, as if recalling a harmless expectation she was happy to have proven wrong. But something about it gave me pause, not in a judgmental way, but in that way where your mind puts a sticky note on a moment. Me being me, I leaned in just a little, and I asked, gently, truly, if you don't mind me asking, how were your former female managers difficult? There was no edge in my tone. I wasn't trying to call her out. I was still turning over something from earlier in the evening, a moment that had sat awkwardly with me. See, before the evening really got going, the hostess's husband had made an offhand comment, one of those stereotypical impersonations about the Hispanic staff at a restaurant he liked, complete with an accent. It wasn't overtly cruel, but it was careless, the kind of comment that slides into the room disguised as humor. She didn't address it, just smiled, and then later referenced her own Hispanic heritage with pride. It was a quick turn, but I noticed it, that small dissonance. So later, when this woman made her comment about women bosses being difficult, I felt another layer emerge. Not a red flag, not a reason to pounce, but a thread, something worth examining. It made me think about how easy it is, even for those of us with good intentions, to carry the weight of stereotypes, pass them along, wrap them in charm, and set them gently into the room without meaning to. How we sometimes echo ideas we haven't interrogated simply because they've lived in us unnoticed. As she continued, I caught a flicker, a slight twitch at the corner of someone's mouth, a quick glance exchanged between two of the other women. Nothing dramatic, but present. And the woman sharing? She answered with grace. There was no tension between us, no awkward silence, just something shifted. It wasn't that she noticed the glances. It was that moment, the quiet realization, oh, she goes there. Not to stir the pot, not to be provocative, but to ask with care and curiosity, what do we mean when we say what we say? And that's when it hit me. There's always that one person in the room who asks the question no one else is prepared to answer. Not to challenge, not to confront, but because they're paying attention. Because something doesn't quite sit right, and they have the courage or the compulsion to ask why. It's not about being disruptive. It's about being present in a way that refuses to settle for surface. That kind of presence changes the temperature in a room, because most of us have gotten used to pleasant, to polished, to smiling past discomfort and laughing over the tension. And so when someone dares to reach past the niceties, to press gently, sincerely into the why, the how, and what's underneath, it can feel like an interruption. But really, it's an invitation. An invitation to be more honest, to bring more of ourselves to the space, to examine the things we've grown used to repeating without reflection. Some rooms lean in when that moment comes, others retreat. But that's the thing about truth. It doesn't demand to be accepted. It just asks to be heard. As I began to share, carefully at first, then a little more freely, I spoke about a few moments from my past, real ones, lived ones, things that shaped me. And almost immediately, I felt it. That pause. The one that isn't loud, but takes up all the air in the room. The moment you glance up after saying something raw, something real, and realize you've taken the conversation somewhere it wasn't expecting to go. It wasn't that they didn't like me. It wasn't malice. It was just discomfort. I had dropped something tender on the table, and no one was prepared to carry it with me. Even now, I still feel that soft cringe creep up the back of my neck, the kind that whispers, "You should have known better." Because here I was, the same woman who could name the subtle harm in a comment about women being difficult, the same woman who clocked the racial undertone in a casual joke, and yet I misread the room when it came to myself. How could I be so perceptive and still miss the cues that said, "Not here, not this much, not with us"? But I know what that is. That's old programming. That's cultural inheritance. Especially for us, ADOS folk, who've been raised with sacred instructions. Keep your business to yourself. Don't give them too much. Don't show them the soft parts they can't be trusted with. We carry those lessons like armor, polish them until they shine as wisdom, and still, sometimes, they feel like cages. Because here's the truth. I had a great time. We laughed, we shared stories, we built a rhythm, even if it was mostly surface level. But I didn't want surface. I wanted real. And maybe that's naive. Maybe that's a little too earnest for some rooms. But I've come to believe this. Vulnerability is not weakness. It's an offering. And last night, I offered up something of myself. Not for validation, not for sympathy, but in hope. In hope that someone else in the room might see that honesty isn't a liability, that depth isn't dangerous, that being human, fully, openly, tenderly, is not a transgression. I didn't share to make the room heavy. I shared because I believed, somewhere deep in my bones, that maybe someone else was tired of performing too. But here's what I didn't expect. As the evening wrapped and people started gathering their things, smoothing over the night with goodbyes and polite laughter, she found me, the hostess, Not with a spotlight, not with a speech. She didn't say anything specific about what I shared. She didn't try to soothe or overcompensate, but she made her way to me deliberately. She leaned in, she looked me in the eye, and she gave me a hug. Not a routine farewell, not the kind of hug you give someone as they leave your home out of hospitality. No, this was something else. It was brief, but it landed. It told me, I see you. Maybe not in full, but enough to know that you showed up whole, and that mattered. Still, I walked away with questions echoing inside me. Did I misread the room? Or did the room misread me? I hadn't told a sob story. I hadn't asked for pity. Without even realizing, I had offered myself, honestly, quietly, as an act of solidarity. No one asked me to, and maybe that's where the discomfort settled in. Not because I overshared, but because I dared to show up unarmored in a space that wasn't expecting it. And here's the thing I keep running into. I don't do the middle well. I either sit back and observe, or I open the door and let the truth walk out with me, hands unclenched. But most people don't expect that in casual company. They expect warmth, charm, wit, not roots. And I get it. We've been conditioned to keep things breezy, to keep the conversations light and the mood even lighter. There's a difference between dumping your pain on people and simply speaking from where you really are. It's not recklessness. It's not attention seeking. It's fluency, emotional fluency. The ability, and sometimes the need, to name what's real, even when the room is rehearsed and pretending. But real life doesn't always spark conversation. Sometimes it stops it in its tracks. So the question lingers, was it too much? Or was it just too honest for a space that's only equipped for banter? Because the truth is, depth can be disarming. It asks something of us. It requires presence. It chips away at the practiced ease we wear to survive the day. And not everyone is ready to take off the mask. That I'm fine face, it's sacred to some, guarded like tradition, passed down like armor. So maybe the real question is this: what's the cost of staying safe behind small talk? And what's the risk of being the one who dares to break it? Because someone always pays. Some pay in silence, editing themselves in real time. Some pay in performance, turning down their light to match the room. And some pay in presence, by showing up whole and being met with polite discomfort. But for those who've worn too many masks for too long, blending in becomes its own kind of betrayal. There comes a time when authenticity is no longer optional, not as rebellion, not as spectacle, but as necessity. And that's when discernment becomes the gift. Not every room is meant to hold you. Not every table is ready for truth. And that's okay, because we don't need every table, just the right ones. So whether you choose to speak or stay still, to open or observe, may it not be out of fear, but out of knowing. Knowing who you are, knowing what you carry, and knowing that being too much in the wrong room is still better than being not enough for yourself. So if you've ever felt the conversation shift after you got real, if you've ever watched a room grow quiet, not out of reverence, but retreat, If you've ever walked away wondering whether your story made others uncomfortable, whether your truth was somehow too much for the moment, let me say this to you plainly. You're not broken. You're not dramatic. You're not doing the most. You're just honest in a curated world. And that kind of honesty, it startles some people. It softens others. Some rooms will pause, look away, change the subject. But other rooms will lean in. They'll pour you another glass and say, "Tell me more." This space right here, it's one of those tell me more spaces. So bring your stories, the ones with the jagged edges. Bring your awkward silences, your stumbles, your too long pauses. Bring the things you almost didn't say out loud. Because here, your pause has a place. Your story doesn't need polish to have power. Your voice doesn't need permission to matter. We're not here for perfect conversations. We're here for true ones. Honest, unrushed, and unapologetic. Have you ever been told you were too much? Or left a room wondering if your honesty was too heavy for their comfort? Drop it in the comments, or whisper it into the night. Either way, I'm listening. We're listening. And in case no one's told you lately, you still belong, even when the room gets quiet, especially then.